It's the 17th of February, 2015, and this is episode 188. This show is intended for informational and educational purposes only. What cryptocurrency enables is new, empowering, and exciting, but we're not experts, just obsessed companions walking the road towards a more peer-to-peer future.
Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin. This is Stephanie here with you, and I have got a treat for you, listeners, today. We're talking with Morgan Rockwell. He is basically a mad scientist, and I mean that in the best possible sense. I consider myself a mad scientist too. But Morgan is working on a bunch of different Bitcoin projects, and they all sort of center around something called the BitSwitch, which is a fundamental building block for a lot of potential technologies. So Morgan, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Hello. How's everyone doing out there?
Well, they can't answer you, but I'm sure they're doing just jolly. So tell me a little bit about how you started your company, Bitcoin Kinetics, and like why you started it, and just start from the beginning and explain what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. The history. Well, I first learned about Bitcoin when I was spending my days on Twitter trying to protest laws like the NDAA and trying to be an anonymous, rebellious internet soldier. And I saw the anonymous characters who were a little more extreme than me. And I was just a data guy, and I would find information and I'd put it up on Twitter. And I found people actually, attacking police officers with their information or sending pizzas to someone's house they didn't like. And they were all using Bitcoins to pay each other to do this. And that was my first awareness of this token that people were using as a monetary use. And I didn't really catch it at first. I didn't understand what was going on. But in my mind, I was trading. I wanted to be a currency trader. I wanted to learn about the currencies of the future. And I thought that the United States, where I live, was going to have this Amero forced upon it, where Canada and the United States and Mexico would have a united currency like the euro. So I was planning to learn how to trade currencies and make money off of it. And then the Bitcoin showed up in my lap. And Max Kaiser and these people I was learning about currencies from started explaining that this is an asset that you should be holding, like gold and silver. And my dad always taught me as a Marine that, gold's very valuable when people want to go to war. And I watched war all day long and realized, dang, there's going to be an acceleration of people wanting this thing. So I started investing in it and looking in it, about $20. And when it went to $260, I sold my Bitcoin and made a fortune on my first time in my life and saved my poverty from ever being like a normal thing. And it changed my concept of money immediately, because I was a TP tent kind of person. I was a mountain man. I didn't really care for, striving for money and gathering it in my pocket. I knew exactly how it worked, but I didn't know what it was. And when Bitcoin showed up, the whole way money works changed. And it was like, I could compare it to like a born-again Christian kind of moment. Like Jesus put the Bitcoin in my hand, and I felt like it was the stick to flip over the table, to beat up the bankers. And it was the way that it was the spiritual money, because all the money I saw was evil and bad. And this was like the first good money that I saw in my brain. So I tried to find a way to make money off the Bitcoin while it was just sitting there at $100 for a year. And I woke up in the middle of the night with almost like a nightmare, hearing bad FUD commercials about Bitcoin, saying it was, criminal money and laundering and laundering and laundering. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a picture of a laundry machine in my head. And I saw a Bitcoin QR code on top of it. And I thought, laundering, I should make a laundry machine that accepts Bitcoin. I tried to wake up my wife, and I tried to wake up, I have this great idea. And she was just out, and I wrote it down, and in the morning, I started really thinking about how can I turn a machine on when I send Bitcoin to it. And so I started looking up relays and home automation and the little devices you put in your wall to turn your lights on from your phone. And then I realized that no one in the entire industry yet is trying to actually turn on service machines like parking meters or gas pumps or laundry machines. And I thought, this is what a Bitcoin's good for because it's replacing the quarter. Quarters go in all these machines, and we might as well just use our phones instead of quarters. So I started finding a way to use open source hardware like the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi, and I wanted to use the most simplest software that I could learn, which was C++, very, mechanical, if and then else. And I wrote a C++ sketch on the Arduino board that read a blockchain's public address on the blockchain, and it basically parsed the blockchain's address every 10 seconds and read the blockchain's public transaction, constantly looking for new data. And when a new payment would show up, that little packet of new data would be sent to the Arduino, and the Arduino would look for a certain payment amount. If the certain amount of Satoshis was there, pin 9 would turn on. And it'd take about 10 seconds.
And Arduino is an open source circuit board, is that correct?
Yeah, it's made by a bunch of guys in Italy. They basically make this Atmel chip on top of a printed circuit board. It is like the most simplest microcontroller, and the design is open source, so you or anyone else could basically copy it, take all the parts from off-the-shelf Radio Shack pieces and build one yourself. And you could go to Radio Shack and buy one. They're $30 at Radio Shack. So it's a board that you can get built, or you could build it yourself. So the concept of open source hardware basically started with things like the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino. And the Arduino is just a microcontroller, and the Raspberry Pi is now, with the new version 2, is a whole computer. But they're both basically the same size. I tried to find a way to limit actually having an operating system on the device. Like the Arduino is just a mechanical C++ operated simple board microcontroller. And the newer Arduinos actually have Linux on one side and a microcontroller on the other side. And now Intel came out with their hardware board, which is called the Edison, which is the same thing. It has a microcontroller on one side and basically a Raspberry Pi with Linux on the other side. So that board is the size of a quarter. And so the Raspberry Pi board is the size of a credit card. So these microcontrollers are getting smaller and smaller, and they're going to be the backbone of what is called the Internet of Things. So they're trying to put near field communication, or RFID, radio frequency ID, which is basically a copper antenna and a chip, inside everything from your cereal boxes to your shoes to maybe even putting disintegratable ones on fruit and food, so that in the future Orwellian society, every single object on Earth could be tracked, and maybe the holodecks-like thing in Star Trek could happen where every little item is tracked and could be virtually tracked, and they could have a virtual version of it. They want to do full-time analytics on everything on the Earth, so this concept of Internet of Things is being pushed for almost 20 years now. I heard about it as a child.
Microsoft has actual pictures from the 90s, or ads where they depict a smart home in the 90s. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. The big financial institutions and even the political institutions of the world in the 90s and even in the 80s were talking about making the connected world, the smart desk, basically the barcode on everything that can be wirelessly scanned, so you don't have to visually scan it like a QR code. And if this was a future, this would allow analytics, this would allow affordable inventory, this would allow a smart world where we only order as much soda as we need because we know exactly how much hops and barley is needed to make our beer and sugar, and all these things could be analyzed automated-wise. So when the Internet of Money comes out now and we have the blockchain, the first thing that popped up in my mind is making the things of the world that are connected take money and accept money and do things with money. So right now in our shop here in Upper Lake, we have smart lights, the Philips smart LED lights. So I could turn the lights on with my watch or my phone. And we have a smart lock from Kwikset, so I can unlock the front door with an NFC lock. And what I envisioned using our BitSwitch technology for is applying all these Internet of Things devices, which are already everywhere, prevalent in the Western world, and connecting them with the Internet of Money so that they accept money and respond to money. And so the simple C++ sketch of the BitSwitch will allow any machine to accept Bitcoin, Counterparty, Ethereum, Omni, any type of blockchain technology that basically a public ledger exists that can be read, and our device turns the relay on when your designated address receives a designated amount of payment or a designated piece of data. And so if a world shows up where bit switches are everywhere, in the door locks, in the drawers, in the lights, I would hope that in the consensus future we have a voting system where we can all vote with our tokens, like a vote coin, and we all can vote to have the doors unlocked with all the guns behind the doors. Or we could vote to have the drawer pop open with the nuclear codes. And if we don't vote, the drawer never pops open and the nuclear codes are never seen. And the world that we live in can literally be controlled through automated consensus using something like the blockchain and something like the BitSwitch.
You're seeing like a positive vision of the future with the whole Internet of Things. That was definitely something I wanted to ask you about in this interview, just to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Oh, there's definitely a catch-22, for sure. I mean, I look at both sides of it. I have to. I watch horrible war. I mean, I know we're in World War III right now, and I watch the news every day and to make sure that my finances are kept managed, because, you know, you watch a banker blow up in Lebanon in his car and Bitcoin's price moves. So the world we live in is so hypersensitive that I think the Internet of Things was planned to be used against definitely dissenters, but the backbone of the technology can be basically taken by us, the people, and it could be used through our monetary control, which we vote with our dollar. Our dollar is our free speech. So a vote coin or a Bitcoin or a speech coin is all the same thing now. And if I can say something and make a machine respond, or vote and make a machine respond, or pay and make a machine respond over the same network, it effectively puts the control back in our hands using the system that 1984 people tried to build to put control in their hands. Just like the network and internet and everything Bitcoin is running on was built by DARPA and military people to spread CERN data from the particle accelerator and to spread military awareness data. And we use it for good things like activism and communicating and sharing concepts like we are right now. But, you know, it was built for military purposes, but that doesn't mean that's what it's always going to be used for. Just like the Internet of Things was probably built by 1984 people who loved the idea of that society. But that's not what it's going to be used for, because we have something like Bitcoin, which can now interact with it and take control of it almost. I mean, I'm a kid that has of Terminator, and if the Internet of Things exists, that's Skynet. My goal was making sure Terminator didn't come and arrest me, because RoboCop's over there guarding Microsoft's headquarters right now. If the world where BitSwitch exists is a future that I get to live in, I get to pay the RoboCop to turn off and not hurt me. Just like I could throw a rock at a human, I could throw a digital token at a robot and turn him off, just like I could turn him on. So the BitSwitch is a great monetary tool to turn machines on, and actually you own a machine or rent to own a machine, or your machine is now accepting money. But it also is a defensive thing. I could turn a machine off with money if it has the switch. So that was a security thing to make sure that my children that don't exist yet, and your children and grandchildren, and the generations that come when Bitcoin is, 50 years old, that they can maybe use it not just as their speech and money, but also maybe as a bullet to defend themselves from, a jerk toaster.
Okay, well, I really appreciate that perspective, Morgan. So much with technology, it's about who controls it and who has the power. And so what you're advocating, it sounds like, is really keeping that ability for control in the hands of people and not giving anyone special privileges in that system.
It's got to be equal. And the fact is, a 1-year-old could get a Bitcoin address. Any person in any country could get a Bitcoin address. And an AI or a robot that believes it has rights can get a Bitcoin address. And so when your self-driving car can pay the self-building mechanic to fix the tires, and it drives itself to the shop and pays the shop to fix itself, the self-driving cars won't need to pay a mechanic like through a person. They'll just have a Bitcoin address. But when the robot says, hey, I have rights and you can't hurt me, and I want to pay for my president to give me robot rights, the future of AI and robotics and machine learning is definitely going to be built and using Bitcoin. I really think that Bitcoin is this human thing we're using now. It's only 6 years old. It's a baby. But when it gets to 20 years old and 30 years old, I see trees and bumblebees and dogs and cats using Bitcoin and robots and software programs paying each other in Bitcoin and no humans involved. And so I'm trying to make sure that we have the infrastructure built up for when that happens, that it doesn't just trample over nature and humanity and society, because remote control drones scare robots. They scare cats. They scare humans. Like, you could go chase a bunch of cows with a remote control car. So the idea that robots interacting with nature it's not planned out properly yet. And Bitcoin is this robot money. So I think that people like Elon Musk saying that artificial intelligence is more dangerous than nukes. Well, what happens when artificial intelligence pretends to be me on Facebook and gets a Bitcoin address and pretends to coerce people for Bitcoin or something, and it's just a robot, Like, I just read yesterday, if a Twitter bot threatens someone over Twitter, who's liable? If a robot's paying a politician to lobby, who's responsible? And I think the Bitcoin is going to open up those philosophical questions, because it's basically the first token it's for all things that can use it, not just man.
That's really fascinating, and I love these discussions. I do want to hear more about the BitSwitch itself and what the applications you see for it. You mentioned laundry, pumps, light bulbs, any kind of machine. So tell me more about that.
The idea is that eventually it will be either a software program that any machine could just take, like an API, or it can actually have maybe a company like Intel or AMD put the software on their chips, where the chips already come with a blockchain reading technology. So now every computer chip on the planet could talk to the blockchain, and then effectively any machine with this chip can interact, turn on, turn off, adjust itself depending on Bitcoin payments or blockchain data. And I first saw, as a business, as a CEO, I have to find a monetary use for this technology. And the first thing I thought of is a high cash, high yielding coin operating business like a laundromat. And Andreas definitely educated me and realized that, laundromats are only in the United States, really. And so I started thinking, okay, well, what about parking meters and gas pumps and other service machines that are worldwide? And that would definitely give my company a perspective value for this device that we're making to try to make me an income and try to give Bitcoin a more usable value.
Morgan, I don't mean to disagree with Andreas, but I know their laundromats are pretty popular in Mexico.
That's another thing, is I think what has happened is the idea of paying a machine to do something is definitely probably a American idea. And really, in the rest of the world, people would be pissed that they would have to pay to make their laundry machine turn on. And I think that's the concept of in the Western world. And I know Mexico and Canada has definitely taken a lot of America's Western kind of values. I think the idea that paying a machine to do what you want it to do is a philosophical thing that I don't know if the rest of the world pays attention to it, because I have only traveled to Mexico and Canada myself. I know Mexico's 7-Elevens accept Bitcoin, but the 7-Elevens in California don't. It's funny that Jerry Brown legalized Bitcoin here, and I know the governors of Tijuana have it, so it's backwards. I thought, in the chaos of the business world, what's the best way to sell this idea, to promote Bitcoin, and also make money? So service machines were the first idea. But the BitSwitch is basically a machine response to Bitcoin data. So my next idea in using BitSwitch was for voting. And like I've said, I've tried to create this concept, which I've had on a back burner and a front burner and a back burner. It's called BitCongress. And it is basically an idea of mimicking every form and section of the United States House and Senate, and basically putting a token to every part of that system on counterparty, and building a token-based Congress that allows tender, votes, stamps to all be logged, someone to put a smart election up, and these vote coins will make a election win or lose, or a politician win over another one, and his tender is there in a token, so he only could get paid each week. The idea would be the bit switches would be prevalent in the world, and this voting system using the blockchain would allow these bit switches to turn on and off. lights in buildings will turn on, locks would unlock.
I hear what you're saying, and it sounds pretty cool, like to do to that system to, basically blockchainize everything. But what if I don't recognize their legitimacy? This is not a forceful thing, right?
What I was trying to think of is an alternative that effectively we build a Congress for the internet. As the Bitcoin is like the dollar of the internet, I figured there needed to be a Congress of the internet, and we need to have our own way to make our own rulings on the machines, that man's written word rulings don't interact with the mathematical rulings of the machine. The idea would be that basically in the future, if there's a robot that says he wants rights and he has a Bitcoin wallet in his brain, he has the right to vote just like you have the right to vote because he has a Bitcoin address. So it's not a he or she or a robot or a dog. It's anyone with a Bitcoin address can now get a vote token and vote. And whether that's a software program or a human or a dolphin that's got a Bitcoin address around his NFC necklace, the world will be strange in the future. And I just want to make sure that the systems we use now are a little more prepared for the changes, because our Congress was built hundreds of years ago for things that it could not have anticipated. And now that the internet is like its own country and has its own dollar like the Bitcoin, there needs to be a ruling system for the machines that basically is the same rules that we should follow. Like if a toaster can't hurt anyone and I can't hurt anyone, I think the RoboCop shouldn't be allowed to hurt anyone too. The law must be equal. If you watch The Matrix and you see...
Or what if there's no law? What if we just don't have any law?
Yeah, well, that word, the law, is just a modern way of describing organized structure, but I don't think that law will maybe exist in the future in that terms of the word law. It may be more of like code. If the internet and the AIs that we use have to follow rules that we also have to follow, like if I can't hurt a human, can an AI hurt a human? And when those laws, either the Congress is so old they don't even know what internet or basically the Bitcoin is, they can't pass laws on that. How are they going to pass laws on AI or machine learning? So we need to build a law system that doesn't take 2 years and doesn't take 6 months and doesn't go on vacation for weeks. We need to build basically a Facebook of voting and legislation that is just like Facebook. You could plug into it or you could choose not to use it. And it's a system where instead of posting about your stupid activities all day and what you like and dislike, maybe you could post a law and see if people want to vote on it or dislike it or change it. I would like to see that the structures of what we as machines and people and nature, we don't want to limit ourselves. And we let like 300 tyrants over in Washington, D.C. limit ourselves. We used to let one guy thousands of miles away limit ourselves. And we don't want machines to limit ourselves either. We want them to advance ourselves. And I would like to basically be able to vote for the punch card for my representative in the House. I don't want him to vote against me and all the other constituents. I want 50,000 vote tokens to say yay. And if he sees that and says no, everyone on the internet gets to read the blockchain proof that his constituency said yes, but he went against them. Right now, you don't get to see the public records of all the phone calls and letters to your senator. But I envisioned basically putting those kind of communiques on the ledger so we all can see who's not listening to their constituency. If they don't, the switches don't unlock. The world of the guns and the tank ignitions don't turn on, and the plane bomb bay doors don't open because it's an automated BitSwitch controlled system. And if that could just be a concept even in a local community or in a company, you could build factories that run themselves, and the smart contract token systems that like Ethereum and Omni are building could basically run a factory with bit switches on every machine. If that concept is monetarily worth something, I think that the future of factories and manufacturing and 3D printing is definitely going to need blockchain technology to automate things. And I think the blockchain is definitely an automation tool more than a monetary tool, because it allows a machine to turn on without anyone else turning it on if it's coming from a certain cryptographic public key. It allows you to take control of a machine with your private key, and no one else can control that machine until you relinquish control by, giving up the private key. And so those kind of concepts were important to me to see an automated future. I've also taken the BitSwitch and plugged it into mushrooms.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Tell us about the mushrooms.
So I live in Upper Lake, California, which is in Lake County, which is the largest body of water in California is Clear Lake. To west of us is Jackson County and Mendocino County. And I have a mushroom hunting license to go gather fungi in the Jackson County forest. So I could just
you need a license to hunt mushrooms?
California, you can't touch mushrooms anywhere if you are gathering them in California in public lands. You are violating a public law. It's basically BLM bullshit, you trespassing and such. And in Jackson County...
Oh boy, somebody voted for that,
I know. The thing is, you don't know who voted for it right now. It's not a clear record. We must go find this. And that's what I want. I want to be able to have these clear distinctions of when a machine turned on and when an asshole said that should be done. Because those kind of records my grandchildren should learn from, and we must have a fully transparent box society, because in the future, the mushrooms may be able to interact with our machines. And the mushrooms are what make the forest grow. And in Jackson County, they're redwoods. And in Jackson County, I can walk around and I could pick up poisonous mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, edible mushrooms. I could pick up the mycelium. I could have semi-trucks full of them, and I could drive them home and fish and game and the sheriffs, and no one could say anything otherwise. Now, if I'm in Mendocino County or in my county in Lake County, and I'm out there gathering pounds and pounds and pounds of fungus, and I get caught by a law enforcement officer, they will think I'm shipping fungus overstate or something and presume that I'm, smuggling psilocybin mushrooms or something. So the idea that mushrooms can kill you or make you trip out really scare the law enforcement and the scientific community to the point where most people don't even want to touch them, learn about them, or even hear about them. So I'm probably one of the only people with a license, besides for my partner who has a license with me, one of my tenants that lives with me. He's a mushroom fungus scientist. So me and him go gather fungus in the woods, many, many different kinds of samples, and they disappear within a week. So there's only so many humans with the license to actually go out to the area where they're growing and gather them before they disintegrate after the rains. So this is like a science that has been unseen by many people, because it's not like a cat or an ant or a dog. It goes away in a few minutes, or it goes away in a few hours, or they take hundreds of years to show up for certain ones. So the fungal sciences are a big neglected part of science and biology. But recently, scientists have just changed the genealogy and basically made me, you, dogs, cats, bacterium, plants, and everything in a new species, fungus. So we're all related to fungus. So basically everything that's biological on the planet has some form of fungus or is living off some form of fungus. And the plant roots have a fungus that connect them to the mycelium underneath the forest. Yeast is a fungus, and the fungus within our mitochondria. All these things are fungal based. And what I've learned from some people that have put theories up on TED, a man said that he believes that fungus is the internet of the earth and allows the plants to communicate with each other through fungal connections. A tree needs more water, and it squeezes the glucose down to the roots, and the roots put the glucose and make an enzyme change in the mushroom. The mushroom then sends sugar, salt, phosphorus, or an enzyme or a pH change across the mycelium network through the forest floor to a bush. And that bush will now relinquish moisture from its root ball. And it literally allows a network of nutrients and chemicals to be sent underneath the forest floor from plant to plant. And the mycelium are what push nutrients up to the roots. And when you step on the forest floor, you can literally see mycelium grow up and grab the debris and pull it back down. So it responds to you touching it. Like mushrooms are so sensitive that they bleed. You could yell at them. They could respond to sound. They get struck by lightning and they grow prevalently because they think they're going to die. So when lightning strikes, they grow and they sporulate. So basically, you squish a mushroom, it sporulates, and then more of them will grow. So there's no way to kill a mushroom. I mean, you could dry them out and kill the spores, but if you squish them and the spores spread, it's kind of like a jellyfish. It just keeps growing and spreading. And so what I've learned is if electricity is interacting with the mushrooms and makes them grow, I've started to do experiments with low voltage into the mushrooms. I used things like candy cap mushrooms, which are an edible mushroom that tastes like syrup. And then I've used jelly tooth mushrooms, which are clear mushrooms that look like a little jellyfish. And I've hooked them up to a BitSwitch. And I've sent a payment to the BitSwitch with an LED wired through the mushroom. And the mushroom was sitting on a copper contact. So the copper is positive and the LED inside the mushroom is negative. And the mushroom conducted 5 volts of electricity and turned on when a Bitcoin payment was sent to the BitSwitch. So the mushroom was able to conduct electricity and hold at least 3 volts through it to turn the LED on. And I had another experiment where I put 5 volts through the same type of mushroom for 5 hours, and I turned the mushroom blue. Now, in general, funguses that are blue are usually poisonous or hallucinogenic, and the jelly tooth is clear and it's edible. So I'm wondering now if I maybe turned a mushroom hallucinogenic or poisonous or vice versa. And so I'm going to have to get some lab rats to make sure that these mushrooms are actually like changing state, because if I can actually turn a mushroom from an edible to poisonous or poisonous to an edible, it has a lot to do with penicillin like antibiotics, and I could do a lot of science with that. And so what my initial goal was to hook a mushroom up to the BitSwitch, to send a Bitcoin payment to the mushroom and make the mushroom do something. Also, if the mushroom did something like was starting to dry out, the humidity sensor on the BitSwitch would read that and it would send a humidity token back to another device. So it would allow machines to talk to nature through the fungus and allow nature to talk to the machines through the fungus. So if a tree needed more water and the mushroom underneath its roots responded to that, and I had a BitSwitch connected to the mushroom network, the BitSwitch would be able to register sugar, salt, calcium as maybe 101. And if that sugar, salt, calcium spread through the mycelium maybe a couple feet, 10 feet, 100 feet through the forest floor to another BitSwitch, I'm wondering if I could send 101 through the forest floor, translate it into sugar, salt, calcium, and have another machine through a distance read sugar, salt, calcium, and translate it back into 101. So that we could use the forest floor and the biological signals through the mushrooms as basically an internet. And I got this idea from a guy on TED Talk who was out there gathering mushrooms with his wife for the last 30 years and said that he thought that this was how the forest worked. So as an engineer, I tried to build technology onto this scientific theory to see if it's true. And I found that mushrooms are conductive. I can grow a copper-filled mushroom with a little bit of electricity and stimulate it to grow. So basically I could use a mushroom as an antenna and then it'll disintegrate 5 minutes later. So that's military applications, communications applications. It basically allows nature to use the radio frequencies that already exist and the sugar and salt and calcium biological signals. We use that as our signaling instead of radio signals, or instead of invasive Wi-Fi and Bluetooth things that, hurt bees and probably give us cancer. I've tried to find a way to communicate using nature and the blockchain, because I believe the blockchain is perfect for the decentralized access of all this information. Whether the mushroom is a certain type of fungus and the BitSwitch registers it on the blockchain, and on the other side of the planet within 10 minutes, a robotic surgeon will find a virus inside a human and it will read from the blockchain that this mushroom is a good antibiotic for that bacteria. And so it would allow you as a scientist in the woods to put up new piles of dirt with bacteria and viruses and fungus in it. The blockchain would read it all, basically parse the whole DNA of all those structures into counterparty data. And then on the other side of the planet, instantly, you would be able to synthesize antibiotics or cures or chemical medicines on that data that was just uploaded 10 minutes ago. So it'll allow specimens to be blockchained and scientists to pay or get paid to send that data to machines or hospitals and such. So scientists will now be able to put their phosphorus and calcium and sugar on the blockchain, and machines will be able to respond and read to it. So that was my third goal, which won't make me any money until someone like Intel helps me or something.
Today's episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin receives support from CryptoKit.com, the easiest, fastest way to send Bitcoins right from your browser. That's KRYPTOKIT.com if you'd like to learn more. Today's episode also receives support from FoldingCoin.net. I've talked about FoldingCoin before. Basically, it's a token that you mine by folding proteins with your computer instead of mining cryptographic hashes, which don't have any utility outside of being consistent, predictable work. You fold proteins, and instead of just earning a mining reward, you also are contributing to a much larger collaborative scientific project. The latest innovation is the idea that you can earn other tokens besides just the project's native FLDC. FoldingCoin Incorporated has developed a system where new tokens can have their participants enter a different prefix to their donor name on the Folding at Home platform to start receiving their new respective tokens, in addition to their FLDC for their folding effort. The first two coins to take advantage of this are Scott Coin and Pow Coin. To get all the details on how to get signed up and earning FLDC plus your favorite bonus coin, head to foldingcoin.net. Alright, time for the magic word. Once again, reminding people that the duration of the magic word used to be 4 days, but now it is 7 days. Today's magic word is fungi. That's F-U-N-G-I. Fungi. You've got until the 24th of February to visit letstalkbitcoin.com or the Let's Talk Bitcoin iOS app to enter it for your share of the listener rewards. Later this week, we're interviewing LTB favorites Jeffrey Tucker and Charlie Shrem. Do you have any questions you want to put into our heads before we get into the calls? Head over to the listener lounge at the forums in letstalkbitcoin.com or follow the link in the show notes for this episode to the question thread. And last thing, if you've got an early token, which you should have if you signed up to receive LTB coin over the first couple of months we were running the program, I've continued to post the in-progress draft of my first fiction book entitled Bit Dropped, set 20 years in the future about a decentralized peer-to-peer onion routing parcel delivery service, posted in the Founder Forum, which is accessible to those with early tokens, and will be accessible to others reasonably soon. But that's enough out of me. Let's rejoin Morgan and Stephanie.
This is incredibly imaginative, and I'm really glad you shared this because I just see so many different applications for what you're describing. And I mean, if some of it sounds a little far out, that's okay because you're actually doing it. You hooked up a mushroom to this BitSwitch and you made it read data and you made it do something.
Analyzed it, and I actually put the data up on the blockchain. So I'm trying to make this a normal scientific behavior. As a scientist, I want everyone to see my data. But I also might want to make some money off of it. But I don't want to hide it.
That's what I was about to suggest because I think this could have incredible applications at automating agriculture, basically.
I mean, a plant's thirsty and it says I need more water. And the BitSwitch will send a humidity token to another BitSwitch, which is hooked up to a water pump. And I've tried to Parrot, the drone company. They have a bucket that waters itself with a humidity sensor in it. They have a humidity sensor you put a bottle of water on top of and you stab it in your plant. And when the soil is dry, it'll automatically water itself. So if those type of technologies are coming from a drone company, and that's Parrot's big, they have a lot of money behind them. That might be a Home Depot-like technology you'll see everywhere. Humidity sensors for plants. All you have to do now is connect it to the blockchain, and now those plants can literally talk to you. They can say, I need this, in a token, and a token could respond back to it and give it what it needs. And I think that's like the beauty of the blockchain is not money, but it's like C3PO. It's like the translator from the toaster to the laundry machine to the gas pump to Coinbase and BitPay and to change tips, APIs. It allows them to talk to the toaster and the lights, and it allows the data of nature to tell the machine, hey, this is what's going on, and the machine could respond and help nature. I'm a hippie, and I don't want to see trees. And I grew up with people that tried to hug trees and talk to trees, and as a scientist, I would like to plug my little relay into the tree's roots and talk to the tree and see if the tree can say, hey, I'm thirsty. And that's the world where we're coming is where I could break out Google Translate and talk to someone in Spanish and Japanese and not even know. And it works. So if that's monetizable. Like Facebook makes money selling your name, your face, your address, what you like. How much money is there in Mother Nature's communications and signaling, when the trees want to grow or when it's going to rain or not? Like I could have a million bit switches in the woods and they could just be weather monitors. They could also be mesh network antennas, and they could respond to weather data, humidity data, biological data, or machine data, all the same. If I put BitSwitch in a bunch of parking meters throughout San Francisco, they'd all be full node Bitcoin mining nodes, and they'd all be mesh antennas. So we'd have our own mesh network running throughout San Francisco in case the power went out. All these solar meters with full nodes in them with the BitSwitch would basically replace the telephone poles. And so I've tried to do that.
Wow. Wait, there's so many amazing ideas in here. I love it. Yeah, keep going.
It's a building block. It's a Lego brick. And I'm a Lego kid, and this concept of the block, the modular thing that could do all these things, these concepts need to be put out there so that people know that you can now go build. But if you didn't know you had a Lego brick, you wouldn't know what to build. So I try to build as many things as I can with this Lego brick because it can go so many places. You could build walls with it. You could build spaceships with it. It's an amazing kind of idea that I just have been bewildered. For 5 years, I've been working on the concept, and 4 years I've actually had it running, and I just haven't seen anyone else try to get involved. And I know BitPay has tried to go back and forth with me like a rope tuggle to try to get involved in using the BitSwitch because they want to do everything in Bitcoin, and I'm very wary of centralized powers. I basically run my company by myself with my Google Watch. I'm just like, I wouldn't say paranoid of other companies helping, but I've been by myself doing this because the central powers that be may not like the idea that we can turn machines on and off. I talk to law enforcement people, which I have a lot in my family, and I tell them a simple example. When you're a cop and you send your little Terminator RoboCop to come arrest me, but he turns around and tries to arrest you, what are you going to do as a cop? And tell your RoboCop, no, not me. Like, how are you going to defend yourself against machines in the future? And the BitSwitch is what I tell them is the AK-47 of the future. It allows me to turn a machine off. I don't have to shoot it. I don't have to hurt it. I just turn it off, and now it doesn't hurt me. And someone could, turn it back on when its gun is out of its hand. And I try to see that world because I don't know if I'm going to live in that world, but I know that my children may, or my nephews and nieces may. And right now, you and me as adults don't have any way on this entire planet to defend ourselves against a machine. And the machines are picking up guns and droning kids around the world. And our smartest billionaires are saying that the AI machines may hurt us. I'm trying to make sure that we have a big enough rock in our pocket that we could defend ourselves from a machine. At the very least, tell a machine, hey, this is what you need to do. My cat's.
That's really interesting. When you have taken care of the cat, would you like to talk a little bit about your physical space and sort of why you chose that space and chose to be where you are in Meat Space?
Yeah. He's just pissed because I haven't let him outside. He got attacked by another cat.
Use the BitSwitch, open the cat door.
Yeah. Well, this is what I've been trying to figure out is like I could actually put NFC tags on my pets, and my NFC lock can actually unlock. It won't open yet, but it could actually unlock. The pet comes up to the pet door. So these type of technologies already exist. The automation world we exist in, and one reason I bought this shop is the town I'm in Upper Lake, California, is the cleanest air in California. The largest body of water in California is Clear Lake, which is about 5 minutes away from me. It is 2 hours from Sacramento, 2.5 from San Francisco, and 2.5 from the coast. So I'm right in the middle. It is the only nuclear safe zone in the United States that a civilian could get to. So if nuclear bombs go off everywhere on the planet, the radiation won't rain down here in my town, so at least I won't get sick. And so I was going to do nuclear work for the Navy, and they told me I was too old, so I didn't do that. And I learned about nuclear technology, and I learned about the nuclear fallouts and what would happen. So I came here specifically to be safe from that kind of thing. And when I got here, I got this gas station, So Bitcoin Kinetics shop is now in the first gas station in North California. It was built in the 1900s. It has 2 Indian gas pumps still in front of it, but the building's concrete is filled in the tanks underground, so it won't be a gas station anymore. And what I've tried to do is turn it into a front shop because the town needs technology. I'm here in front of my shop now. We're on Main Street. We have 2 big garage doors, and it used to be, like I said, a fuel station, and I bought the place to try to turn it into an electric car station. So I've been petitioning Tesla Motors to make the place a little more high-tech, and the front gas station will hopefully become a charging station, so electric cars will be pulling into the front of our shop. And if that happens, it'll allow a little more technology to come into the town. I think what would happen is there'd be a little more upgrade to the town because it's like a cowboy place. There's nothing but cowboys everywhere. And what I've tried to do is bring 3D printers and technology and Bitcoin, and I bring Radio Shack pieces and computer parts and put them in our display window. So kids come in and they get to solder and play with little bits and Legos, and I have some computers set up so they could play Minecraft. And I'm trying to bring some technology to the youth because the town is just in the middle of the woods. There's no one here that doesn't have agriculture in their family. There's walnut orchards and pot farms and vineyards everywhere and creeks and mountains, and it's a nice place to live. But I came here because I wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of the busy cities. I was in San Diego originally, and it was just too chaotic down there. There's too many people, and I couldn't compete or get my voice heard. And here, every single person in town knows me and Kinetics as the Bitcoin guys. So we've become kind of famous because it's such a small town, and we basically fly drones around and have the Bitcoin laundry machine in the front window. And I've tried to teach the kids here that they don't have to trim weed for the rest of their lives, because that's basically all the economy was here for the last 40 years. And I try to bring the modern industries to the children, like 3D printing and robotics. And I have the Nest in our gas station, and we have smart cameras and smart lights, and it's kind of like the House of Tomorrow at Disneyland in our shop, because I try to show off automation technologies, and I try to show off artificial intelligence. I try to basically teach kids how to talk to robots here. So at least once a week I'll have kids come in and I show them how to use a 3D printer, and I basically scare them like John Connor about Terminator and tell them they need to learn how to talk to robots and how to interact with machines and basically build machines, because we all fear that the robots will take our jobs. But I always tell the kids, you don't have a job unless you build robots, talk to robots, kill robots, or control robots. And that's the only kind of jobs that will exist. Otherwise, you'll just have to live and be free and go climb mountains and swim and be a human again. And some people are afraid of that. They're afraid of giving up slavery and living again. And they don't like the idea that robots are going to do everything. But I try to balance the fairy world of that, because I'm, like I said, I have hatchets and bow and arrows and teepees, and I'm an Indian. And my dad raised me like a Marine to live off nothing, because that's what he was. He was a Marine in intelligence. And so he told me the world, and I didn't like the concepts of having everything. So I think in the shared future where we really don't need to have everything, and I don't know who owns the world or who's trying to sell the world, but if you can say you own a square part on the planet, the robots will say that it's not yours if a man doesn't say it's not yours. And this square piece of land I have now is basically my fort. It protects me from the weather, and it keeps all of our technology safe. But in the future, we all may be like in a shared economy where the people with the biggest guns may not want anyone to own anything. And I don't know what kind of society or world we're going to go into, but I know that the machines are going to be a big part of it. So what I try to do is steadily pace technology with nature and try to balance so that the technology doesn't step on nature. When Bitcoin first came out, I tried to tell everyone to not force it on the third world, because, like Andreas says, the unbanked need it. That's very true. But the unbanked don't need smartphones with NSA backdoors in them either. And the unbanked don't need advertisements from Google and Microsoft on their phones all day. They don't have that. They don't need that. They may need the money, but they don't need all the junk that comes with it. I love the fact that I can have a laboratory here. It's like Doc Brown's lab. It's full of robots and drones and batteries and technology, and I can just like show kids like it's Tomorrowland. But then I could take them out in the backyard, and I could take my shotgun out, and I could shoot the drone in my backyard and show the kids that this is how you shoot these things, because one day they may try to shoot you. And I could balance that world a little bit, because I've had to pull guns on people to defend my property in San Diego, and I've had to like protect our paper wallets from thieves who thought that they could steal Bitcoin like cash, you know? And I think the nerdy geek community is like afraid of that. Like, I remember Andreas said that on Joe's Rogan show about reaching for a gun, you'd have to grab his inhaler 20 times, you know? And I think that's the prevalent theme in the Bitcoin community, but the Bitcoin community needs to be aware that people with guns and a lot of money and military people are using Bitcoin, and violent people are using Bitcoin, and thieves are using Bitcoin, and that doesn't mean it's bad. That means you must be prepared that everyone's going to use Bitcoin. And that means the gates, the gatekeepers, the gun holders, the guns themselves, they all should really be connected to Bitcoin so that we can kind of, you know, keep track of it. I really think the blockchain technology is not an anonymous thing as it's been sold to the activist community. I think it's an analytical tool that will eventually be the Star Trek credit, because when you go into, you know, your spaceship on Star Trek, you say you want a cup of tea, it says it's 1 credit, but it's not money. It's just to keep track of how much tea they need tomorrow. You know, it's inventory analysis kind of stuff, and I think that's what the Bitcoin's going to turn into. Right now, people are so busy with its value, they don't understand what it could do. But in the future, it may be Minecraft makes every square a Bitcoin address, and Oculus Rift plugs into it, and then they just zoom it out so that every square is an atom in the solar system. And then, you know, you give a blockchain address to every atom in the solar system, and you could make virtual reality that way. And every little atom in the virtual reality will have a Bitcoin address that you can pay to turn on, turn off, to go left, to go right, to turn red or blue. And that's the virtual world will start using the blockchain to basically keep track of where everything is. And the blockchain technology is sci-fi futuristic stuff. And people try to dumb it down by putting money on it. And people try to like simplify it by telling the government that they should regulate the most regulated mathematical money Earth has ever seen. It's sci-fi stuff, and I always love the sci-fi stuff, and I think it needs to be creatively seen through a child's eye of, this is like an awesome toy, and you need to be able to play with Bitcoin, because you need to be able to touch Bitcoin, you need to feel it and know it. And one of my biggest complaints at being at CES was, I said on Mad Bitcoins, I talked to him about this, there's no things on the shelves there. There's all a bunch of logos. And where's all the cool stuff that the kids could play with? That's like anti-CES. Everyone else had stuff, but the Bitcoin people. So I think that my company is going to bring the stuff to the Bitcoin community. I want to bring the machines, the relays, the batteries, the hardware wallets, the BitSwitches, and all the things that you could touch. Because right now it's kind of like ghost town. We're all in a virtual world. Like, I'm talking to you on a screen, but we have to go to New York City to the Bitcoin Center if we wanted to sit down and have a place to sit, you know? So I've tried to turn my little lab into like a Bitcoin Center for California here, where we are. And I get Bitcoiners coming by once in a while just because we have the big Bitcoin sign in the window. But I think we need to see another decade go by before the powers that be really understand what Bitcoin could be used for. Because if you don't teach the powers that be, they won't be the powers that be. I want you and me and my children and things like that to be the powers that be. And I think the blockchain will help us get there.
Well, Morgan, this has been so cool. I love what you've said, and I think it's a great note to wrap up on. I just want to ask you, how can people get in touch with you and where can they find you on the internet and in real life in case they want to continue this conversation with you?
Well, you can find us at www.kinetics.cc. You can go and actually come all the way up through the woods and come find me in my shop if you like. We're at 9450 Main Street in Upper Lake, California, 95485. My phone number is 619-721-3384 if anyone would like to get a hold of me. And I'm definitely interested in collaborating with the community, and I need help. If anyone wants to work for us, I'm interested in hiring 1 million people. I just have to get more money soon. I'm definitely going to be here in the Bitcoin community until Bitcoin takes over the world. Then I'll go on vacation and go into my teepee. But for now, I think that we have a future, and Bitcoin is definitely our future. I think the kids need it more than the adults. And I don't mean to discourage anyone over 30, but I try to focus on as many children as I can because I think that Bitcoin will probably not really be a mandatory known thing to use from birth until 2020. A child born in 2020 will probably have Bitcoin right out of the womb. It will probably be one of those things like Satoshis will be set aside like for their children. And I think when that is the time that we live in, you're going to want your laundry machines and your door locks and your automated cars to take Bitcoin, because I want my car to be controlled by my Bitcoin address. I don't want no one driving me off a cliff when I get in Tesla's little self-driving car. I've tried to teach them, hey, let's make everything Bitcoin operated, and it puts it back in our hands. It's caveman. You got to have a Lord of the Flies, like the rock's in my hand, and I'm a child, and Bitcoin is the rock, and we can't have 60-year-old guys take it away from us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Today's show receives support from CryptoKit.com, the easiest and fastest way to send Bitcoins right from your Chrome browser, and FoldingCoin.net, mine medicine, not hashes. Content for today's episode is provided by Morgan Rockwell and Stephanie Murphy. Music for today's show was provided by Jared Rubens with the LCB theme song, and Brother Saturn, who provided the neat rework of Niles Fromm's song Me, which also was the song last time, but this one was completely different because it's a different remix because it's open source music. If you make open source music that seems like I might find it awesome based on the types of music that we play on the show, you can always send an email to adam@letstalkbitcoin.com or just send me a private message on the forum too. My username is Adam. We got a bunch of good episodes coming up, so stay tuned for that. Once again, thanks for listening. See you next time.